All right, then we're talking with Dr. Steve Haltewanger.
Yes.
All right, of LifeWave.
LifeWave.
LifeWave. Okay, so I'm still new here, but that's all right. A lot of people are new to LifeWave, and a lot of people are questioning what is this thing about this transdermal patch stuff. Kids, let's talk a little bit. What is this stuff?
Well, first off, it's non-transdermal. That means nothing goes into the body. And what we do is we take materials and we make crystals that will absorb different frequencies of light. And the crystals are organic, and they have the properties of being semiconductors. And so we have an optical semiconducting material that will absorb light, and it will transmit certain frequencies into the body that can promote biological processes.
Oh, wow. Now, you're talking to someone who actually have come to a point that I kind of understand what you're saying. All right. The public, what you're saying is that only light is like the medium of change. Is that what I'm getting?
Well, basically, we're talking about an energy field. Let's just start simple. Most people have televisions or radios, and those are electromagnetic fields of energy. And
which are impacting us too.
Yes. And so what we use are a higher frequency field. And the body is developed or evolved or was created, however you want to look at it, and it can utilize these specific fields of energy. And that's nobody thinks anything about going out in the sun and getting a suntan because it's a natural process. It happens all the time. People's skin get darker. That's light affecting a pigment called melanin. Same thing happens with vitamin D. You wind up getting vitamin D is created by sunlight actions on molecules in the skin. And so that's a natural process. And so what we're doing is very similar, is the inventor, David Schmidt, figured out how to create a local source of energy that can be placed on the skin that can activate different biological mechanisms.
Wow, the thing that I like, and I feel we're entering this age where we are understanding that actually everything is energy. All right. Now, the question is, when you start understanding that everything is energy, that means the medicines we take today, they're all energy. The question is the energy harmonic? Is the energy producing or generating something that is going to be a helpful result? Okay. What I see you're doing is that you're taking the same approach, because everything is energy, but you're taking specific frequencies, specific wavelengths, if you will, and you are just delivering it in what we might consider a non-physical way.
Well, it's a non-chemical way.
Yes.
But it is a physical way. And the reason why our technology is very safe is we use materials that are natural to the human body in construction to create our molecular antennas or crystals. And so the signal is natural to the body. And that's really the crux of the invention, because I have a laboratory. I have at least 15 different pieces of equipment that can generate a frequency into the body. And so, but I cannot match all the aspects of the signal because I don't have an organic electronic device. And that gets a little technical into what's called waveform, but it's a very specific way the signal is created that matches the natural components of the body.
Right. And the other thing too, a lot of times when we get into energy type devices and we get into frequencies, we tend to focus on a specific frequency when in fact there may be a spectrum of frequencies that are actually therapeutic, if you will, that the body is looking for.
Yes, then we're not putting a frequency into the technology. That's a lot of people say, oh, what are you putting in? We're putting in a sense, antennas that will generate a signal, and it's like a radio station, except we're not using radio waves. So basically we're using like a crystal radio set. And so the crystal radio set, in a sense, sits on the top of the skin. The body's own heat energy field activates a signal that is carried back into the body, and at the cellular level is able to activate biological processes. It has a name called biophotomodulation, if you want to get technical and look it up, and there are literally thousands of articles on photobiology, on laser therapy, on LED phototherapy. So there's lots of terms that can be used. Biophoton emission, and so there's a whole field of physics where people have begun looking at the physics of it and then the biology of the physics. And so it's through application of these new developments that have occurred over the last 20 years that we're able to create a technology based on prior experimentation.
Now, this is certainly where we're moving, and it's one of the things that I found really I'd say ingenious about it, in the sense that you're using the body. The body essentially is the trigger, the body's own energy. In other words, it's like the catalyst for what this is working. So there's like a communication between the two, would you say?
Right.
Food on webtalkradio.net. You may be watching it too, with Adam Abraham, and we're talking right now with Dr. Steve Halterwanger of LifeWave International. And let us continue.
Well, people don't think about it this way, but if you were to put somebody in a special room that was free of all electromagnetic signals, they're called copper-walled rooms, among other things.
Faraday cages.
Faraday cages. You would actually, if you had the right equipment, could actually measure an entire spectrum of energy emissions coming off the body, including the brain has its own, is basically like a radio transmitter, and very low signals, and you can actually take a fingerprint and identify one person from another by the emissions coming off their body. It's we think in the visual field, so what we see are in the narrow range of color band, but when you actually look at the body, it emits energy in a very wide spectrum, from ultraviolet into the infrared band. And so when you have the right kind of equipment, we're like a star.
Yes, we are. We're made of light, that's for sure. Now, since this is such a new and a different delivery mechanism, since it's not really a chemical base, where do you stand with our alphabet group, FBA stuff like? What's the story with that?
Well, we're registered under the homeopathic registration, because one of the things we've learned to do is put homeopathic substances into the technology, so that would allow us to be in the homeopathic registration. Okay. And when you look down at, this gets really deep into the physics, and you start looking at structured water and how these crystal forms are created homeopathically, and some people think it's complete nonsense, and other people create their life work, a PhD studying this stuff. So you got a complete diversity of opinion between nonsense and, wow, this is a really interesting development. We're only now developed technologies in the last 30 years that are capable of measuring these things that other people thought didn't exist. And so it's a matter of whether you want to look at the microscope or not. I'll give you an example. There's a guy in Germany that invented a microscope that can look at viruses. Now, according to standard principles, you cannot see a virus because it's too small.
A standard microscope would kill it, something like that.
Right, so this is a microscope looking at living tissue. And he got it focused to a virus, and he had a microbiologist who refused to look into the scope because he didn't want to violate his own belief system.
Yeah, the church did that 500 years ago with Galileo and the telescope. They wouldn't look at the moon. Yes, you're right.
Right. So, it's like, we think that's kind of nonsense, but, that same mentality of Galileo still exists today. Here in front of him on the bench was the representation, or the experiment demonstrating the technology, but he refused to look. So there are people that refuse to look and refuse to believe, and that's fine.
But they won't refuse to criticize.
No, they won't refuse to criticize. But what we do is we do clinical, double-blind, placebo-controlled studies to demonstrate the effects, and we just keep doing one study after another. And over time, many of our critics have become at least neutral, because they say, well, there's something going on. We keep getting more. They keep getting more and more studies. So that's all we can really do. We're not trying to change everybody's mind. We're trying to demonstrate, hey, we have a new technology. It's been developed. It works on real physical principles, and it can impact people's lives in a very non-toxic way. So it gives people an alternative especially for pain control, than having to just stay on pain medication. I mean, pain medication is great when you have an acute injury, but if you stay on it for years, you wind up getting kidney and liver problems. So, I mean, it's nice to have a choice.
Absolutely. Tell me what water's role is in what role water plays in the effectiveness of, or to what extent does the quality of water that one intakes affect the effectiveness of your product, or is there a factor?
Well, yeah, actually there would be a fact. And this goes down to one of the things we utilize are the semiconducting properties of the connective tissue of the body. The body, under the skin, under the surface of the skin, there's connective tissue. It's made up of collagen, hyaluronic acid, among other things. And some people are going like, I don't know what he's saying. But basically proteins and gel-like materials. And these are electrically conductive when well hydrated. But when they get less hydrated, they become electrically resistant. So what we learn is our technology works best when the body's well hydrated, because the conduction of the signal will pass into the body. And so the types of water you drink, there's different names: clustered water, structured water. A good quality water that can improve the hydration of the proteins and gel will actually improve the effectiveness of our technology. And if you get down to, there's a guy named Gerald Pollock.
Yeah, University of Washington, yeah.
Written several books. Cells, Gels, Engines of Life is one of them. And basically he talks about how water molecules are structured around proteins and organic materials. And it's like a saran wrap or plastic wrap. You have a cardboard tube, which is the center of the protein, and around there the layering would be the water molecules. They literally layer one layer after another, and they're nanometers thick, so they're very small, but they're literally layers and layers, like you have a saran plastic wrap wrapped around a cardboard tube. And when they're properly layered, that protein works properly. And when it's disordered, there's dysregulation in the activity of the chemistry of those pathways.
Wow. I read this morning, did a little search before I came down, because there are people who call this whole thing, hoax and everything else, and a lot of them go back years. But I read a piece where a guy who was using this and has seen how it works, he had a person, and before they got their passes, before they used them, he had them call him, okay? And what he said do is he asked this lady to do some push-ups, okay, before she did it, to see what she could do. And it turns out she was able to do 11 push-ups. Okay, then he's had her drink some water, then put on a patch and wait about less than 10 minutes. I think it's like 6-7 minutes. Then do some push-ups. She did 80 push-ups.
We've seen that. It doesn't happen that dramatically with most people, but there's a number of factors happening, and depending on which patch. One patch we have is called it's an energy patch. It's actually a positive and negative, and it actually helps the body burn fat as a fuel. Fat gives you more energy per gram than, say, sugar, so you get more calories, more oomph for your burn, more octane in a gas tank. And another thing that happens is we're actually can show with our research that we redistribute and rebalance the activity our energy flow, and we rebalance the activity of the nervous system. So you got a number of factors taking place at the same time. So in a sense, the body is more in a state of coherence or balance. And we've actually done coherence studies. Back in 2005, we did 2,000 people. We were looking at energy signals in the body, and we found that when we used certain patches or certain places, we'd move the body toward a greater state of coherence. And we once had a Tai Chi master. We put the patches on that went into perfect coherence. We'd never seen that before.
You probably hadn't either.
No, well, I don't know. It was she, and she's about 5 foot tall and could beat both of us up. She really could. And she was an amazing individual, but I mean, she already had a great state of coherence. But we put the patches on, and we were looking at, like an oscilloscope, and we were looking at these waveforms that, these are called standing waves, and it gets, I don't want to get so technical, but we basically had electrodes placed at various points on her body, and we were measuring energy signals, and we found these energy signals all lined up with her. We'd seen people move toward alignment, but we'd never seen complete alignment before. So that was an interesting thing. But so what we've done is we can see that there's a field of energy, and you can have a chaotic, disorganized energy, or you can have more organized, and that's a healthier state.
Well, we certainly agree. I believe this is part of the change of many changes in our time that we're in right now that are necessary, because just the way we have been doing things for generations, for my generation, in terms of medically, in terms of how to mitigate disease, we have been going in the wrong direction and not even looking to see, or not being willing to see something different. And so it's time to change. And what you're doing and what you're showing, being able to see a waveform and measure coherence and confirm the presence or lack thereof, is what the public, each one of us, needs to know and understand, that incoherence is a direction toward health. Disharmony, disease, all of those things are all states of disharmony or discoherence or dissonance, as the case may be, if you're talking as an engineer.
Right.
You see, so I like that because it helps to confirm. We know it's not usual yet, but how do things become new is that we take those steps and actually go through the slings and arrows of people's criticism especially when they don't know what they're talking about.
Well, it's any new technology has to go through a number of stages. From initially it's ignored or ridiculed or opposed, and then eventually it gets like, well, everybody knows that. Yes. And so you go through these various stages, and right now we're in the ridiculed and opposed only because it's so new. No, it doesn't, it's not in the textbooks yet. Mm-hmm. I mean, you can't go to medical school and pull out a textbook on electronic medicine, mm-hmm. or how to use light therapy and treatment. But once you get out of medical school, you go into dermatology. They use lasers. Ophthalmologists, I mean, they primarily operate with lasers now. That's phototherapy. Yes. And surgeons now are using lasers as scalpels. Mm-hmm. And so that's a phototherapy. So that's a very intensive form, but there's gentler forms. The dermatologists are using are using LED phototherapy as a skin treatment for improving wrinkles. Mm-hmm. So that's another form. So doctors are using this once they get out of school, but they're not necessarily trained on the basics of the chemistry and the biology of phototherapy, mm-hmm. And so so eventually they'll get there.
Well, Dr. Steve, I really appreciate you spending the time with me and with my audience here, and we're going to watch LifeWave and just help people. It doesn't hurt to get going with it, All
right, thank you so much.
All right, thank you so much, mm-hmm. Dr. Steve. Let's have it at that.